Diamonds to Pebbles. Chapter 2. The ship anchored at a harbor Evelyn did not know. She knew she was in Hamilton territory, but the castle was not in sight. One of the sailors gave her vague instructions, so she followed them the best she could. She wandered off into an evergreen forest, following a path which quickly ended due to its disuse. Evelyn saw no other choice but to keep heading forward. However, the sun was setting before she made it out of the forest. With no other shelter around, she settled underneath a tree's green canopy. The princess rested on the ground and snuggled further into her fur coat. Before she closed her eyes, she admired the mountains that shot up higher than the trees. She had always wanted to visit this kingdom because of the mountains. From the sea, they appeared tiny, like she could flatten them with her finger. Now, she felt like a pebble at its feet. Her eyes stung with tears, but she reminded herself that this place was her haven. She was free and far away from her father and the kingdom's political war. While she wished her dreams were pleasant, they were far from it. She was back at home, and her father had married her as planned. But that wasn't the worst of it. Because her brother's execution was to be the wedding's entertainment. Thankfully, she did not have to witness his death when her dreams were disturbed by a dog's growl. She opened her eyes and spotted horse hooves and the dog's legs through the hanging branches. The hound sniffed its way over to her. Quickly, she planted her face down, afraid to be caught. In the darkness of her hood, she heard a thud and a crack of twigs. There was a bark, then the shuffling of branches. "What is it?" a male voice asked a bit further away than the hound. "Some kind of animal," another voice responded, resounding just above her, which took her by surprise. "The poor thing is trembling in fear. I've never seen an animal like it." "Get it to come out then. You could just get off your horse, lazy cow. You're speaking to your elder, little runt." "I'll get off my horse when I'm good and ready." "As if I don't outrank you, Lycos. Just poke it already." Evelyn peeked through a tiny crack between her hood and the ground. She watched as a spear extended forward, ready to poke her. She knew she should say something, but at the same time, she wanted to run for it. The spear got closer. "Wait!" she shouted, her head flying up and coming face to face with a blue-eyed young man. He jumped back, and the branches covered her as he stepped away from the tree. The hound followed him and barked aggressively at Evelyn, though it could no longer see her. She had only encountered a dog once, and it was enough for her to know she didn't like them. Yes, dogs were far cuter pets than her grandma's nurse shark, but sharks don't bark. "Was it that terrifying, Artis?" the other man teased, finally getting off his horse. His presence immediately calmed the hound, and he shuffled closer to the tree. "Don't you have the courage of a bear in your veins?" "Wait, don't." Evelyn ducked when she heard the swoosh of a sword. Daylight landed on her as the chopped branches fell near her hands and knees. When she peered up, she met the second man, who had darker hair than the first. He looked down at her with yellow hazel eyes that reminded her of a predator. He blinked and then tossed his head back in laughter. "A girl. Hey, Artis, we've found your bride. Do you think she speaks bear?" Artis, the blue-eyed man, pushed the other way. "Shut it, Lycos." "Miss, why are you sleeping here?" Evelyn lowered her head, knowing how disgusting she must appear to them. It was apparent the two were of noble birth, and she felt ashamed to be in their presence as she was. "Please have mercy on me, kind sirs, I only wish to know the direction of the castle." "The castle? What business do you have there?" Evelyn clenched the dirt beneath her. She was sure they would not believe her if she told them the truth, so she lied. "A job. I need a job and maybe some shelter." "A bath, too," Lycos added with a smirk, drawing closer to his black horse with the hound at his feet. Artis rolled his eyes and beckoned Evelyn to come out. Ignore my cousin. He always smells like a wet dog. Evelyn bit her tongue to refrain from laughing. As she crawled out from under the tree, she was able to compose herself. When she stood, she listened as Lycos responded to the jab. Well, if you're being such a gentleman today, why don't you give the girl exactly what she wants? As I recall, our fearless king needed an extra pair of hands. You are insufferable. But yes, that is the case. Artis turned to her. Do you know how to clean, cook, and mend clothing? She stuttered, wondering what she was getting herself into. In the end, she decided it didn't matter so long as they took her to the castle. Jade would eventually arrive to clear the air. Yes. I'm willing. He smiled, causing a dimple to form on his left cheek. Good. From this day on, you are in my service, King Artis of Hamilton. Evelyn gulped as she realized how stupid she had been. She should have known as soon as she heard their names. Since she was a child, she had to memorize the various royal families from each kingdom. So, what's your name? He asked, trying to pull the hood off her head. Evelyn quickly grabbed the other side of the hood so that he couldn't reveal her face. Revealing her face wasn't that much of a problem since they hadn't met before, but she wasn't about to risk it. I have none, she said, knowing her name would be familiar to them. Lycos laughed as he lifted himself onto his horse. Then we shall call you Allerlyra. The young king shook his head, walking to his white stallion. You are too cruel, Lycos. But you do need a name, miss. So what shall we call you? When he peered down at her, the rising sun hit his face at just the right angle. Evelyn had seen many handsome men, handsomer than either of these two before her, but something about Artis caught her off guard. She thought perhaps it was the white horse. Jade had always told her that good men rode upon white horses. Then again, Jade had also said men were bugs in disguise. Ali is fine, she said, thinking of no other name. Well then, Ali, follow us to the castle if that is your wish. The horses galloped forward with the dog trotting ahead of them. Evelyn ran to catch up, but she was no match for the horses. In the end, the distance between her and the men grew until they looked like tiny blurs. However, they never left her line of sight, and she didn't need their guidance once she was out of the forest. It was clear then where the castle was located. When Evelyn finally entered the castle grounds, the two royals greeted a young woman along with a couple. The two women had fair skin and the lightest blonde hair Evelyn had ever seen. It was so light, Evelyn wondered if white was a better description than blonde. The man, clearly the husband of the older woman, was no doubt Artis's father. They had the same brown hair, though Artis's father had gray in his trimmed beard. Racking her brain for the names of Artis's family members, Evelyn put a name to each face. The younger woman was Artis's older sister, Rosemary. And the other two were Artis's parents, Snow White and Nathaniel. To this day, Evelyn found it odd how Nathaniel bestowed the crown on his son once Artis turned 21. It wasn't unheard of. In fact, it was a common practice, but Evelyn's father would never dream of giving up the throne until he was dead. Hence, the situation she and her brother were currently in. But to think Artis had been king for 4 years was bewildering when Halcyon, a year older than the young king, was still a prince. To Evelyn, it didn't seem fair. Halcyon was more than capable of ruling. Without meaning to, Evelyn's gaze caught the attention of Rosemary. The princess's hazel brown eyes landed on Evelyn with curiosity, wondering what kind of person bundled up in furs when spring was taking its course. Evelyn quickly stared at the ground, but then she heard her new name from Artis's mouth. She slowly walked forward to the king and his family, bowing before them with respect. She'll be working for me from now on, Artis explained. It seems she has nowhere else to go, and she claims to know how to cook. The king glanced at her, seeing the dirt underneath her nails. Better go clean your hands before you start. The kitchen isn't that hard to find, just follow the smell of burnt food. Evelyn bowed once more and wandered off, heading in the direction of the main building. The guards must have been notified already because they did not stop her as she walked inside. While she believed it would take hours to find the kitchens, the king was right when he said she'd smell burning food. Wasting no time, she ran into a room billowing with smoke. A few servants were shuffling about the room, taking their finished dishes out of the kitchen in a hurry. They left a purple-haired man running around by himself as he attempted to prepare multiple dishes simultaneously. Evelyn rushed forward and hurriedly blew on an over-boiling pot and yanked it away from the fire. The man then focused his attention on pulling out some bread. The top half of the bread was burnt, and he used his oven mitt to fan out the smoke. He clicked his tongue, running over to crack a window. Once the smoke cleared, the man peered over at Evelyn. "What in blazes is a bear doing in my kitchen?" "I'm not a bear." "I know you're not." "It was a joke," he said, fanning the air a bit more before sighing. "Just tell me you're here to help." "I believe so. All the king said was that I was serving him." "So you'll be in and out." "Oh well, your help will still be useful." Evelyn looked over at the bread, if she could even call it that. "I'm assuming you usually don't burn things like this." He nodded. "Yep, when I had another hand or two to help out around here. My entire team has been busy catering to the unique food palates of our guests, leaving me to prepare the royal family's meals by myself." "Why are there so many guests?" Evelyn asked, moving out of the chef's way when he slid over to the pot in front of her. The man bent down and sniffed at the steaming liquid. With a wooden spoon, he proceeded to taste-test the soup, nodding with satisfaction. Only then did he answer her question. "It's courtship season, little bear. And we have an unwed king, so naturally, the High King of Avani kindly suggested all events take place in Hamilton. Of course, the invitations have also been extended to Baldwin and Tara Neal just this week. Relations have been going smoother as of late, and we'd like to keep it that way." Evelyn suddenly recalled Jade's words when she said she planned to invite Evelyn to Hamilton anyway. She couldn't help but wonder if the courtship season was what her friend meant. During the moment of silence, the purple-eyed man stared at Evelyn's coat, wiping sweat off his face. "You can take off your coat, you know. I realize Hamilton's weather is chiller than most, even during summer, but it gets mighty hot in the kitchen." Evelyn adjusted the long coat. "I get goosebumps easily. It's better if I keep it on." He shrugged. "All right then. Can you at least tell me your name, little bear?" "Allie," she replied. "Well, Allie, my name is Reuben." He smiled kindly before dishing a bowl of soup and placing it on a silver tray along with half of the bread that wasn't burnt. "Give this to the young king, will you?" Evelyn took the tray and headed toward the exit, then she stopped and asked, "Where exactly am I going?" Chef Reuben snapped his fingers. "Right. Almost forgot you don't know the place. The king's room is 2 lefts from here. And trust me, you won't miss it." She nodded and scurried off to find the king's room. Like her own father's chambers, she wondered if the king had a doorway lined with precious metals. If not that, then something even more extravagant awaited. Walking along the corridors, she found herself blending in quite well. Instead of shining armor in the halls, there are stuffed creatures instead. Antlers are mounted on the walls along with tapestries depicting wolves and bears. Vases lined the hall with blooming white and red roses. When she passed a mirror, her eyes settled on the bear she had become, masking her golden hair. Dirt lingered on her face, and she remembered she had been commanded to wash off. She sighed and continued forward. He'd probably lecture her, but warm food was better than cold. On the second left turn, she knew which room was Artis's. The hallway led directly to it, and on either side of the doorframe were paintings of the young king. Evelyn refrained from stopping to stare at them, but she couldn't help but glance at the one where he sat upon his white horse. The mountains were painted behind him, and a helmet was tucked under one arm while the other extended out to the viewer of the portrait. It was as if he were offering her a ride, a means of escape from her harsh reality. She tore her eyes away as she neared the double doors. Making sure to tap lightly, she knocked at the door. Artist's voice granted her approval, so she opened a crack in the door and slid in with the tray of food. The room was far bigger than she imagined, with another room attached. The young king stood over a circular table with piles of papers. 2 couches were on either side, but he made no use of them aside from storing a plethora of books and his hunting gear on top of them. Evelyn searched for another table to set food on, but everything was occupied. So, Lycos wasn't kidding when he said artists needed a personal servant. Just as Evelyn thought about the detestable prince, he appeared behind her, having been lounging in the only available chair in the space. "Ah, our Lyra is here at last," Lycos proclaimed, causing Evelyn to seize up, though neither of the men noticed. "After seeing all those beautiful ladies arrive, you do put a damper on my mood, even if you bring food." "Well, it isn't for you," Evelyn remarked, thinking nothing of the comment until Lycos' grin was replaced with a hateful glare. "Why you? Lycos!" Artist shouted, stopping the prince in his tracks before he could step any closer to Evelyn. It was the first time the king looked up since she entered the room. "Are these really all the invitations we sent out? I remember receiving more acceptance letters than this. I need to know if someone is missing, especially those traveling from Baldwin and Terranil." Before Lycos backed away from Evelyn, he gave her a cold stare. Then he said, "As I told you, I delegated the task to a servant. You don't need to read over them. Maybe you didn't know this, but that boy doesn't know how to read. And I specifically asked you to handle it. So, if you wouldn't mind, maybe you'd like to finish the remaining paperwork I left for you in the study." Lycos rolled his eyes, but did as Artist asked, storming out of the room. Evelyn stayed put, still wondering where to set the tray. The king didn't pay her any attention as he sighed, staring back down at the invitations. "As I thought, Dorian's invitation isn't here, but we have their acceptance letter," he said in a reverent tone, then he chuckled, "though Lady Jade did send word that she would be tardy, and she's close friends with the princess." Evelyn fidgeted as she realized he was talking about her. She peeked down at the acceptance letter and saw Halcyon's signature at the bottom. From that, she gathered that Halcyon and Jade meant her trip to Hamilton to be a surprise. To think her arrival here could have been a joyful occasion. How she wished she were with Jade and Halcyon. Artist faced Evelyn, silently noting how her gaze was fixed on the letters. She quickly stood up straighter and awaited orders. The young king came over to her, looking at the food on the tray. A smile spread across his face, creating that dimple again. "Reuben burnt the other half of the bread, didn't he?" Artist asked, not expecting an answer as he swiped the tray away, setting it down on the papers scattered across the table. "I'm sure he told you why. And if he didn't, well, the papers should give it away. And since you are the only woman closely serving me, I would ask that you keep an eye out on the ladies while I'm not around. Then report their behavior to me. As the only unmarried king attending these events, I have no doubt every single woman in attendance will be eager to place herself in my line of sight." "So I'm your spy?" Evelyn asked, not anticipating that task. The king removed his hunting gear from off the couch, letting the bow rest against the side of the table. He sat down and leaned against the armrest. His view of her was slightly tilted. "Yes, but that doesn't mean that's all you'll be doing. You'll need a reason to be there if you want to avoid suspicion. Is this the real reason you decided to take me in?" "Of course," he said, then he patted the books next to him. "Now go return these to the library for me." She glanced at the books and strolled over to them. Carefully, she picked them up one by one until she couldn't carry any more. As she neared the door, she peeked over at Artis. He reclined on the couch, savoring the bread and soup that Chef Reuben had made. Evelyn awkwardly twisted the handle to the door and used her foot to gently kick it open. Again, she had no clue where she was going.